Hello everyone. I'm back for my second video. I did promise I'd make another one, so here it is. Today we're going to be talking about the character creation for Cyberpunk 2077, the game, based on my knowledge of the character creation aspects from the pen and paper role-playing game Cyberpunk 2020. Pretty much the reason why I'm doing this is because the trailer was so it was so real to the actual pen and paper game. Like, there was a lot of things in there that was in the actual pen and paper stuff that I have a feeling that this knowledge might actually come in handy to anyone looking or seeking out more stuff. So there's a couple of things I want to go into today. The first is the roles and classes, break down onto what each of these classes do, the aesthetics of the character creation, what I think could be possible, and some of the backstory stuff for the characters as well. So going into it, we're going to be looking, the source book that I'm using right here is the Cyberpunk 2020 core rulebook. There is a few alterations in the Cyberpunk 2077 rulebook, but you know, this is what I know, so let's go through it. There are 9 roles in the game. There's rocker boys, solos, netrunners, corporates, techies, cops, meteors, fixers, and nomads. Techies, they're sort of broken down into 2 roles, but we'll get into that in just a sec. So rocker boys are basically your performers. They're the rock stars. They're the you know, the popular singers. They're the Drakes of the universes, or the Britney Spearses, whatever you want to look at it, however you want to look at it. Their special ability is what's called charismatic leadership. It allows you to sway crowds equal to his ability level squared times 200, which is to say, at level 10, which is the highest level you can get your special ability, 2 is that's like a whole stadium worth of people. So in the actual game itself, you can use that to sort of start a riot. You could use that to one of the coolest ways I've seen it used is to sort of have a bunch of people show up at a corporation's base, like a tower, and just sort of like push their way into like the ground floor to make it so that the player characters can sneak in while a big distraction is happening. So there's things like that. I suspect that they'll probably touch on a lot more stuff with social media and that sort of stuff in the game as well. It's hard to know that sort of stuff too much in the role-playing games because everyone has their own idea of how that works, but at least in the game it's going to be very clear. On top of that, I've also heard rumor, and I won't be able to source this because I don't know where I read it, but I believe that they will be using the roles or the classes and giving them their own special storylines, essentially. So if you pick a rocker boy, for example, there's a good chance that your charismatic leadership will come into play within particular plots or points in the game. I don't expect you to be able to send in 200,000 people at the drop of a hat whenever you decide to do it, because that would be silly and very game breaking. So, you know, the solos are gun-toting individuals. They're the bodyguards of the game. They're very good at shooting. They're very good at being not ambushed, I guess we should say. And the special ability is what's called combat sense. So the way that you roll abilities in this game is you take a D10, you add your relative statistic or attribute, and then you add your score to your skill from your skill. And the difficulty or the DC ranges from 5 all the way up to 30. 30 being really impossible and 5 being really easy. The difficulty comes in chunks of 5s, and that's sort of how you break it down. With the special ability for the solo, the combat sense, Basically, it's another. The way that it works is it shows up on your character sheet as another skill for combat sense, and you would add the total of your combat sense to any initiative or awareness checks that you make. So let's say you make an awareness check as a solo, the skill formula would break down 1d10 plus, I guess, probably intelligence, probably intelligence, or maybe reflex, intelligence or reflex, one of the two, plus your awareness skill, plus your combat sense, and the total would go up. And let's say your combat sense was a 6, right there you would pass literally every single check that was 5 or lower without even bringing up any other skills. So it's a very powerful ability, especially one focused around shooting and stuff like that. It'll make it so that you can't be, jumped. Netrunner. Netrunner is basically your hacker boy. He's the type of guy that can, jump into unfamiliar technology, computers, and navigate around and find what he needs to find very quickly. So in the actual role-playing game, anyone can hack anything, right? That's the difference here. Anyone can hack anything. Anyone can shoot any guns. Anyone can drive any car. The difference is that the Netrunner, when it comes to hacking, has this thing called interface. And the interface basically is essentially how he hacks. So he has access to locate remote, run software, control remote, LDL link, load, create, and delete. And basically these additional things allow him a breadth of additional powers and stuff like that when it comes to accessing things either remotely or in the net, or I was about to say Matrix, but that's a Shadowrun thing. I caught myself this time. It basically means that they can do things a lot quicker. Keyboard jockeys, people who use like actual keyboards and manual interfaces and that sort of stuff, have a complete disadvantage when it comes to that sort of stuff. So that's the difference. Key difference there. Netrunners are so much better at hacking. The techie. Techies are like people who work really well with machines or human machines, bionics and stuff like that. So the techie breaks down into 2 different skills. The first is techie using jury rig, and the other one is medtech using medical tech, and they're both the same class, if that makes any sense. Jury rig is basically the general ability to repair things, to MacGyver things. So for example, if you wanted to make there was like maybe a car that wasn't working and you were strapped for time, you could jury rig the car to work for 1d6 turns times the level of your skill. So you would be 1d6 turns in the actual role-playing game, but let's say in the actual computer game, you'd be able to make this car work, and you'd be able to drive it away until you find another car to hijack, I guess, would how it would be work. You could also probably make simple bombs or set traps or stuff like that, basically. Medtechs. So medtechs are a little interesting. I actually don't think you'll be able to play a medtech in the game, in the actual computer game, mostly because medtechs deal with surgery, and I don't suspect that the game will allow you to even die during surgery. So in the role-playing game, the way that you install cybernetics in your character is first, buy the cybernetic. Second, find someone to install that cybernetic. That cybernetic has attached to it a surgery difficulty level, which is to say if it requires major surgery, you'll be taking 3d6 worth of damage, I think it is. I'll have to double check that. But you'll be essentially, you just straight up take damage from being in surgery. And then the surgeon skill is also applied to it. And there's a good chance that on major surgeries, your character could actually die, which is fucking hilarious. So in the actual pen and paper game, having a player character who was also a surgeon meant that a lot of the issues of finding a surgeon, buying him out, blackmailing him, whatever, was taken off the table because you had a player character who was really good at surgery. Which is to say that, at that same time, that player character might fail, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. Cyberpunk's a very lethal game, and even in upgrading your character, you can die. So that's what the Medtech does. Perform surgery and medical repairs. Helps in that regard. Media are your journalists, your news presenters. Either they go out and fabricate news or create news themselves, or they hunting for a scoop. Think any sort of cameraman or whatever that you've seen in, say, like Godzilla or monster movies or anything like that. They're very similar in style to that. So they have a thing called credibility. Basically, you can use credibility to inspire people to do right or wrong things, because your credibility means that they believe your on-air persona or they don't believe your on-air persona. One of the two. Cops are basically cops. Their ability is authority. You can basically walk into a building and have people evacuate under the authority of the police or under your authority as an authoritative figure. In my role-playing games, anyone who uses authority to instigate things or to do things corruptly, I would always institute that they have responsibility attached to their authority, which is to say, you can't just walk into a room and ask everyone to leave, then rob the place, right? Like, I mean, you could, but someone might ask a question as to, like, oh, what's your badge number, for example? Or which department are you with? That sort of stuff. Basically make it so that you, as a character, have more responsibility to your actions and that sort of stuff. I don't know how they'll handle it in the game. Hell, you might not even be able to play a cop in the game. It's a good chance that you might not be able to. Corporates, I touched on this a little bit in the last one, but these are men and women who work middle management at corporations. They have a special ability called resource. So basically, anytime you want to request resources from your company, you can. It's tied to the level that you have. So you can use it as a persuasion skill. So basically, let's say there's a bunch of homeless people inside of a abandoned house or factory that you want to set a sniper nest in. So you can use your resource ability to pay them off, and they could leave. On top of that, you can also require like cars and like personnel and that sort of stuff, and maybe even weapons or helicopters or whatever. Corporates, the resources power is very, very powerful. Yeah. Fixers are your information brokers. They sell and buy information. His special ability is called Street Deal. It's the ability to locate people, information, etc. You, instead of knowing one person, you have connections to every person everywhere in the game. Gameplay allows you to locate and acquire a desired person, place, or thing very easily. Sorry, I'm just going to take a drink of water real quick. So essentially, they're the guy in prison that can get you what you want, Street Deal was always very useful as a player character. I always thought it was a really cool one. And having a fixer in the party meant that you could, not waste time searching for what you wanted to find. And the last player class is a Nomad. Basically, nomads are like nomadic people that, for whatever reason, be them minorities or be them outcasts from society, don't live in houses. They have like roaming groups of people. and they are normally either like, workers, like handyman or industry workers, that sort of stuff. Also, they can be hired on as mercenaries. So if you're a nomad, your special ability is called family. It means that you can call in as many family members as you want as your family family ability level times 2. So if you're level 5, you can call in 10 helpers from your family to come and assist you in your actions. So that's the roles and classes. There's a couple more in the actual Cyberpunk 2077 rulebook, but I don't have nearly as much knowledge of that as I do of this. The next thing that we need to talk about here is career points and the actual statistics, as they call them, or attributes, as I like to call them. So there's a couple of ways of doing it in the pen and paper game. The first is you roll 9d10 and total them together. That's how many character points you have to put into whatever ones you want. The other one is cinematic stuff, which is to say you can have 50 through 80 points depending on how powerful you want the player characters to be. And the last is you roll 1d10 for each of the stat and you place those in the stats themselves. So, pen and paper style, you can do whatever you like. In the actual role-playing game, I suspect it's probably going to be... It's not the role-playing game. In the video game, I suspect that it's going to be basically like... If any of you's played Vampire the Masquerade, or Bloodlines, that is, or Deus Ex, I suspect that they will just, at the start of the game, just be like, make your character. They might even have like... pre-made characters, like say I want to be a fixer, and then they just like recommend your point selection. Hell, it could just be first person shooter, who knows, but I doubt it's going to be like that. But that's what I think it's going to be. So there's a couple of there's a bunch of statistics you can be here. 9 in fact. We'll go over them now. Intelligence measures your problem-solving ability, finding out problems and noticing things. Reflexes, it's a combined index of your basic dexterity, but also physical conditioning for feats of driving, piloting, fighting, and athletics. Basically, reflexes measures everything you do when it comes to fighting. So if you want to be good in combat, reflexes is your joint. Cool measures how you act under stress. So when the bullets start flying, how does your character react to that sort of stuff? In the actual game itself, like very stressful situations, I make players roll cool, and then they can sort of like role play out their characters after that point, however they like. But in the actual video game, I suspect cool to be like a negative modifier that would so let's say you have a very poor cool score, you have 2, the lowest it can be, and then you get into a combat with someone and they start shooting you with bullets. Someone with a low cool, for example, might have a lot more gun sway during active combat, or they might have some sort of visual blurriness to being in combat or something like that. Who knows? But I suspect it'll be an automatic thing. Technical ability, index of how well you relate to hardware and other technically orientated things. You use this ability for basically accessing a computer that you have no knowledge of, fixing and repairing things, creating things, that sort of stuff. Luck is interesting. In my games, we do it differently, but luck essentially means, let's say you want to persuade your way into a gang that you are not a part of, and you're trying to convince someone that, oh yeah, no, I'm Bob, I started last Tuesday or whatever, right? In the game, you would roll a persuasion check, which would be like, I guess, intelligence, persuasion, and or intelligence, fast talk, and that would be and a D10, right? That would be what you roll. But let's say you have 6 points into luck. A session in a role-playing game is when people sit down and they have a game. It could last from 4 to 12 hours, whatever you want to do. For that session, you have luck that you can add you can add as many points as your luck score into a roll for once during that session. So going back to the persuasion thing, say you really want to get in, you just add 6 points from your luck pool into this roll. That means you'd be rolling 1d10 plus 6 for your luck, plus reflex, plus persuasion, and the difficulty might be 20. So right there, you've made it a lot easier to pass that check. Now, you wouldn't have any luck left over after you've done it. But yeah, you have to nominate to use luck before, before you actually roll. So yeah, and it comes back at the end of the session. So for me, luck, I didn't really like how that works, so I changed it. But in the actual game itself, I suspect that luck might be more in tune with how lucky you are to find things, much like in, say, Fallout, the more modern Fallout games, or any sort of MMO or anything like that. When you open a chest, you have a chance to roll items, and your luck score might come into play when it comes to that. Who knows? Attractiveness, that one should be pretty simple. How sexually appealing or attractive you are to people. Now, this can be very easily modified with cybernetics and surgery, plastic surgery. It's very vain, the game, so you will find that a lot of people do that a lot. So there's going to be a lot of attractive people in Cyberpunk. And then there's going to be people who look natural who would probably be considered ugly. So attractiveness will probably be pretty important. Movement allowance, I don't know if they're going to have this in the game because it is a first-person shooter. So, but in the role-playing game, the pen and paper one, movement allowance, so basically the game in combat is stipulated up to every turn is 6 seconds. Your movement allowance determines how far you can move within that allotted 6-second time, be that running, sprinting, walking, or leaping. So, if you wanted to move faster, if you were a melee character with a sword, for example, you would want a high movement allowance so that you could close the distance a lot quicker. The most important stat are the last two, though. The first being empathy. Empathy relates to how well you relate to living things. It's a measure of charisma and sympathetic emotions. In the actual role-playing game, the pen and paper one, your empathy is strictly tied to your humanity. And having a low empathy means, like if you had a 1 empathy, it means that you don't care about anything. And having 1, everything starts at 2, right? If your empathy goes to 1, that means you lose control of your character, and the GM will then control your character. And you don't want that, because the GM will then be like, okay, your character is what's called psychotic. If you've watched the first trailer of the Cyberpunk 2077 video game, with that lady sitting in a pile of bodies with her arms all stretched out, and she's all like, completely blurry-eyed, and she doesn't give a fuck that the police are shooting at her. That's what's called psychotic. And essentially what that means is you've put too many cybernetic pieces of cyberware inside your body can't take it anymore, your brain snaps, turns off, and you start eating people, essentially. So the way that it works in the actual pen and paper game, for every 1 point of humanity that you, 1 point of empathy that you have, you get 10 points of humanity. Let's say you wanted to carve out your eyeballs and put something new in outside of the surgery and all that sort of stuff, you would also lose empathy. And let's just say that for the housing and for putting in magnetic eyeballs and stuff like that, it'll be 2d6 worth of humanity score. So let's say you get, I don't know, 11. For every 10 points of humanity it costs you, you lose 1 point of empathy. So if you had 6 empathy and you had a total of 60 possible humanity that you can have, you have 11 because of your eyeball purchases. Your empathy will then go down to 5. As I said earlier, getting to 2 means you're the cold-shouldered type of guy, and getting to 1 means you're reading people. Big leap, I know, but that's how it works in the role-playing game. So if you're interested in having a lot of cybernetics inside of your body, you will need a very high empathy score. And the last one, which is very important, is called body type. Body type represents how muscular and well-conditioned your body is. You don't have to be muscular, but just like how well-conditioned your body is, what your constitution is like, you know. So there's a couple things that it modifies. The first, it modifies how much you can carry, right? This is, you know, your weight limit, that sort of stuff. So you can go from 2 all the way up to 10 points, 10 points being extremely strong. You can carry up to 10 times your body type in kilos. So for example, if you're very weak, you can only carry 20 kilos. If you're very strong, you can carry 100 kilos, you know, that sort of stuff. Or 1,000, I guess. Yeah. Basic math. How does it work? You can also deadlift 40 times your body type in kilos. So think back to lifting up boxes and crates and Deus Ex to find, you know, alternate routes, that sort of stuff. So the other thing that it comes into play is, and I don't know if this is going to be the case in the role-playing game. I don't think it's going to be as lethal as they make it out in the pen and paper game. So pen and paper game, every single time you take damage, be that being punched in the face or being that shot in the foot, you will make a stun check, a stun save. And the way that it works is there is a score between 1 through 10, right? And that number that you need to get under. So let's say you have 6 in your body type. If you get punched in the face, if you roll over a 6, you will be stunned. Be that like you just sort of blink for 6 seconds and you don't get... So let's say in initiative, you're in a bar fight. The dude that you just insulted rolls a higher initiative than you do, so he gets to act first. His action is to punch you in the face because you pissed him off. You get punched in the face, you take damage, but then you also roll a stun save. And you fail your stun save because you rolled higher than your body type, which was 6 on a 1d10, which means that you miss your turn. You do not get to react to him punching you in the face. He then takes his turn again. He continues to punch you in the face, and he, you know, kicks the shit out of you, drags you outside, and then, you know, he shoots you. So the biggest issue in Cyberpunk is being unable to react to things. So this guy who punched you in the face, he now has an opportunity to what's called coup de grace, which is to say put a gun to your head and pull the trigger, effectively killing you. Now, when it rolls to your turn again, you get to make another stun save. And if you fail again, you lose your turn once more. So that's how it works. In the actual game, the video game, I suspect that there is going to be some rolling of dice behind closed scenes. Let's say you're in combat and you're shooting a gun like deka deka deka, and you get shot, right? I imagine what's going to happen is that maybe you take damage, stun save happens. Let's say behind closed scenes you fail. I suspect that you will more than likely have some sort of effect that happens. Like maybe your aim gets kicked up, or maybe it's harder for you, or maybe you like drop your weapon for a split second, then you have to pull it up again, or maybe you fall to your knees. Like I suspect it'll take control away from you for like a second. That's how I imagine it working in the video game, because it is a first-person shooter after all. The next thing that happens is death saves. So basically, having a higher body type means that you can stave off death a lot better than most people. So basically, if you're mortally wounded, you make a death save every turn, and it's basically higher body type, less likely it is for you to die. And the last one that happens is what's called a body type modifier. Now, this represents your innate ability to not be damaged. So the way that combat works in this game is someone shoots you, the DC to hit you is the distance that they are away from you and whether you're moving and all that sort of stuff. It all constitutes, right? So they hit you. Let's say they hit you with a pistol, and the damage of this pistol is a D8, right? It's a D8 worth of damage. And, I'm just making this off the top of my head, the damage numbers. But each weapon has the damage numbers comes from the caliber of the ammunition used to damage you in a lot of cases, right? So higher caliber rounds means more dice are rolled and damage. Maximum sort of damage ranges between like 30 and 40-ish, depending on the type of gun that you're using. So anyway, they shoot you. Let's just say 2d8, you get 16 points of damage, right? You're hiding behind a bar. They shoot through the bar. Now, every single thing a bullet goes through, the damage is reduced by the stopping power, or SP, of the thing that it went through. So I highly suspect in combat, in the video game, you're going to be able to shoot through just about anything. It's going to be pretty cool, actually. I highly suspect that there'll be a lot, like after a firefight in a bar, for example, shit is going to look destroyed and fucked up. But having said that, you're hiding behind a bar. The stopping power of the bar is 5, right? So you reduce 5 damage from the total damage that you took from this bullet. And then you're wearing combat fatigues, which reduces 4 more damage from that. And then after that, you've got like cybernetic plating, which reduces that even further, like probably another 5 damage off of the top of that. So right now, we've gone down from 16 points of damage, and we're down to, what did I say? We're down to 2 points of damage, right? Now, your body type modifier is 6. So that means after the bullet's gone through all this stuff, right? All this stuff, it gets to your actual skin or your muscle or whatever it is underneath the cybernetics that are there, and it does damage to you. Now, your body type modifier reduces that even further. At 6 points, which is average, you take 2 more points of damage off the top of that, effectively nullifying all the damage from this bullet that hit you. That's how body type works. It's a very important skill to not die, essentially. And that's all the that is all of the characteristics or the statistics or attributes, whatever you want to do it. So yeah, that's basically that. Next is skills. Skills is basically how things work. So each role in the game, all 9 roles, has what's called career skills, and I'll show you them right now. Sorry, I was finding the page in the book. So they have these things called career skills. Now, these career skills are things that you get 40 points, right, in the pen and paper game to pick, to put into any of these skills. So 40 points. Let's say you're a nomad. So your character special ability is family, and then you get awareness/notice, endurance, melee, rifle, drive, basic tech, wilderness, survival, brawling, and athletics. These are the skills you can put 40. You can distribute 40 points to anywhere along here. You can put up to 10 points in any skill. Now, skills always start off at 0 because they're skills are not attributes, right? So, or statistics, as you call them in this game. Sorry, one second. Take another drink of water. Now, these career skills, you have 40 points. You can put them wherever you like, break them up however you like. In the role-playing game, if you didn't have a point in a skill, that means you weren't proficient at it at all, and there was no way that you could make that check. So, for example, that's not to say that you couldn't drive a car, right? Like, the difference is that you can't drive a car under duress, which is to say you can't drive away from people shooting at you. You can't drive away from explosion. You can't speed and not crash your car. You know, things like that, right? So, you know, you distribute them however you like. I don't know if the video game will have this many skills, but they might. Who knows? They might. They might even just break it down a little bit easier, because the master skill list is a little different. You got things like zoology, system knowledge, stock market, programming, mathematics, physics, operate heavy machinery, gyros, stealth submachine guns, AV tech, cryo tank operation, biology, chemistry, composition. You know, you got skills that a lot of people wouldn't ever use for anything. Now, once you've done the 40 points in your skills, you got these things called pickup skills. These pickup skills are a mixture of your statistics from reflex and intelligence, right? So you add them together. Let's say the total was 9. You get 9 additional skill points that you can put into whatever you like. So you cannot use these on the same skill points that you use for your career skills. So you can't, let's say you're a solo and you put your career skills into rifles. You cannot use your pickup skills, the 9 that you got from your reflex and intelligence. You cannot use them on your rifle skills. That's the only the weird thing that you can't do. So you could be a hacker or a net runner who's really good at grenade launchers, as I said earlier, because anyone can take any skill, essentially, is how it works. So that's pretty much all that you need to know there. Okay, what's next? Aesthetics, right? Okay, so part of what makes up a character in at least the pen and paper game is that Night City itself is very multicultural, multi-ethnic, multinational. So during the actual character creation procedure, you get to pick not only how you look with like tattoos, piercings, type of clothes that you're normally found in. Nude is one of these options, by the way, just so you know. Hairstyles. But you also get to pick what your ethnic is, where your ethnic origins are, I should say, more likely. So we've got Anglo-American, African, Japanese, Korean, Central European, Soviet, Pacific Islander, Chinese, Southeast Asian, Black American, Hispanic American, Central South American, and European. Now, the reason why I don't suspect that we will see this, actually, there's 3 variations on what I suspect we will find in the actual video game version of this, is that because in the trailer we heard a voiceover, right? Either that voiceover is, and this is the first option, that voiceover is an NPC. Okay, that's some sort of like tutorial NPC or whatever, and the character that you create will be will have very little vocal capacities. However, they will have different accents based on wherever you chose your character to be from. On top of that, they'll probably also have different styles of hair, skin tone, faces, that sort of stuff, depending on where you're from. That's the first option that I suspect. The second option that I suspect, it'll be very much like Mass Effect, where they have a male and female voice, and those voices will not matter as to how you make your character look, right? That's what I suspect, because there's probably going to be a lot of voiceover work in this game, I suspect as well. The third option is that, again, it's an NPC, and you play a character who doesn't have a voice or doesn't say anything. That's the other option that we can go with. But either that, or they'll. I guess a fourth option would be they have preset characters, and you don't get to pick your ethnic origins. Though I don't know if they'll do that. I mean, it's very expensive to do this, but I don't know. It seems hard enough to make a video game without needing to do all that sort of stuff. So, all right. So the next one that we need to talk about is the backgrounds and stuff like that of your character. So we have the family background. Basically, in the role-playing game, you have a flowchart of how your character comes out and what your character builds. Now, when I GM this game, I generally say to my players, look, don't actually make a backstory for your character. We'll generate that backstory for you when you play this game. In my case, I've played a lot of role-playing games over my life, and I honestly think that that Cyberpunk 2020 has the best character generation backstory generator I've ever seen. So basically, you either choose or you roll in each of these stats. I always get people to roll. So basically, family ranking, you know, let's say your family was a gang family, and your parents died or gave you up for adoption or something like that, right? There's a ton of different options in here, and one of the things that comes out of this is what your childhood environment was like and how many siblings you had. Now the siblings break down into roll a 1d10. 1 through 7 is equal number of siblings, equal to the number of siblings you had. On 8 through 10, you're an only child. And then for each sibling that you have, let's say you get 6 siblings, which I've seen before. It's kind of frustrating when it happens, but it also builds the really cool character. You roll a 1d10 for the sex, and then you roll the age, which is to say you don't roll the age of the actual character. You just roll whether they're older or younger than you, and 10 is a twin of yours. And then for each sibling, you roll how they feel about you. Now, in a role-playing game as a GM, having this sort of stuff, this sort of detailed breakdown of a character is really good, because then you can bring in characters. Like this, they're making characters for you to use that are very personal to them. It makes a much better experiences for a player when that stuff is the truth. And you know, that's the character that they're playing. Next, you roll motivations. Now, as a GM, you also do this every single time that you make an NPC. So let's say, you know, you have a brother that hates you for whatever reason. So then you would pick the personality traits that best suit that character, or you can roll. Now, one of the things I like to do here is, like, let's say you're shy and secretive. The person you value most is a pet or a lover, right? What do you value most? And it's honor, right? And what do you feel about most people? People, I'll wipe them out, give the place to the cockroaches, or most people are untrustworthy, don't depend on anyone. And your most valued possession is a dog. I'd like to have a guess of what character I just made then. That was John Wick. That was definitely John Wick right there. So, you know, you get your motivations out of the way. Then this is something that I do think they'll touch on in the actual game, which is called life events. I don't know how detailed it's going to be. It'll probably just be a questionnaire or some script, and maybe it'll bring in NPCs. Who knows? So the way that this works is your age, your starting age for every character is 16 in the role-playing game. I suspect it'll be a lot higher in the actual video game, because I doubt they want to create a game where a 16-year-old can literally shoot up anything, use guns to create a massacre. So basically in the role-playing game it works like this. You start at 16 and then you roll 2d6, and let's say you get 7 on your 2d6. You are now what does that put you at? You're I guess 23 years old, right? I had to do some quick math. But for every year after 16, you will roll on the life events table. So at age 17, you roll a 1d10, and if you 1 through 3, you get big problems, big wins. 4 through 6, friends and enemies. 7 through 8 is romantic involvements, and 9 through 10, nothing amazing or life-changing happened to you that year. Some of these things include modifying your attributes or your statistics or skills. Like, for example, find a sensei, begin at +2, add a +1 to a martial arts skill of your choice. And And some of the bad things are like, you are hunted by the law for crimes you may or may not have committed. Roll 1d10 on 1 through 3. Only a couple local cops, 1 through 4 through 6, entire local force, and 7 through 8 is state police or militia, FBI, that sort of stuff. So these are the things that sort of make or break a character. Romantic involvements and friends and enemies basically also generate additional NPCs for the GM to use against the player. I suspect that in the role-playing game they won't go into as much detail as they do here, because of the reason that it would just be an absolute fucking nightmare. What I do suspect happened was they'll probably have a variety of choices that you can pick from. Like you'll be able to pick a background like gangbanger, for example, and then that'll just come with a few questions in there. Like maybe that will change the the sex of a romantic involvement that you had with someone, or like, you know, that sort of stuff. I suspect it'll be very sort of linear, like a path choice. You won't be randomizing literally everything that come out. If they did do this in the game, though, I would be very happy, because it basically means that everything that you've done or worked for will sort of come together pretty well, and you will have a very robust character that fits into the world perfectly. So yeah, that's pretty much it for character creation right there. That's pretty much everything. It's a very personal experience to make a character in the Cyberpunk game, especially with like the backgrounds and stuff. And as a GM, I generally use that as a way for the character. Oh, I just lost that. That's weird how that turned off. Why'd that turn off? Anyway, it doesn't matter. I suspect that in the actual game itself, there we go, it's back now. I suspect in the game itself, it won't be very detailed, but as a GM, it's a very useful resource to sort of get the player motivated to join the world, especially when you bring in NPCs that they had a hand in creating. Like one of the players I had created a running instructor that they ended up having a salacious relationship with. And then they broke it off, and, you know, then she ended up like killing him, but that like defined her character in a way. So, you know, there are things like that that most role-playing games don't get into, and this is why I love Cyberpunk 2020 as much as I do. Anyways, guys, thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, let me know. Also, if you have any thoughts as to what you would like to see next in terms of like breakdowns or anything like that potentially, and how it relates to Cyberpunk 2077, the game, let me know. Some of the things I think I might dip into if I get time is I'd love to go and break down the mini game that will be used for netrunners, or what I suspect will be used for netrunners, because that is a whole kettle of fish that even some GMs who play this game don't touch on. I never touched on it because it's fucking incredibly complicated. But if there's any other things that you want to see, let me know. I'll be happy to go into details for them. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much for all the support. I'll see you in the next video, I guess. Bye-bye.